The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marina Sprocki, and I'm the host of Always Another Way podcast. I have a master's in professional counseling, and I am the IPPY Award-winning author of Stop Looking for a Husband, Find the Love of Your Life, and Nasty Divorce, A Kid's Eye View. I write positive divorce advice for the HuffPost, and I'm trained in clinical hypnosis. And this podcast speaks to out-of-the-box thinkers, and it's for those who hear the call of hope and always another way. And if you're very rigid and set in your beliefs, this might not be your cup of tea. However, you should note, taste can and do change. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. I really do appreciate each and every one of you and all of those of you that share this with others. It is much appreciated. And today, before we begin, because we are going to be talking about the family on Netflix and other religious scams, I want to let you know, I and my guests, we are not going to bash any religion at all. But what we are here to point out is among this faction of religion, there are some rogue people in here. And we're going to talk about that and then kind of weave that in. But, and then the disclaimer for me, I have a tendency to get emotional and sometimes a little heated around this topic. I will try to have some self-control and be as unbiased as I possibly can. But the reason why we're talking about this, when this documentary came out, it just of course, hit me emotionally with all the scams that I know of, and you can go Googling and find it. But scamming in the name of the Lord is not just an occasional thing. It is rampant, and it happens all the time. You know that thousands upon thousands of people have been sexually abused by clergy members of all faiths for decades, if not maybe since the beginning of organized religion, but I can't prove that. And they have the nuns too now. So not only are followers being abused, and you can Google it's rampant. And then they're being hidden too. There's another book, it's called Betrayal of Trust, Clergy Abuse of Children by Annie Laurie Gaylor. And what she talks about in there, and we're going to touch on this, is just sort of the disconnect when things like this happens, when somebody's supposed to be good, but they're doing bad things. And they can hide behind things like, well, he's a respected member of our community. Or, it's not for you to judge, that's God's job. But yet, we do live in a society where there is punishment for things that you do. CNBC has a huge article called Religious-Based Financial Fraud is Rampant. And one of the things they talk about there, Ephraim Taylor fleeced some $16 million from members of his church flocks in 43 states by preaching the so-called prosperity gospel. Televangelist Benny Hinn, who was telling people to plant their seed money into his ministry in order to receive God's abundant blessings, well, he's got a reason to pretend to do an about-face because 2.5 years ago, the IRS and postal inspectors raided his headquarters and were looking for evidence of tax evasion. And so he's going to be facing criminal charges. Talk is cheap and transparency is expensive. Which brings us to the family and my guest, and a little bit about the family. It's an enigmatic conservative Christian group known as the Family, or C Street, who wields strong influence in Washington, D.C. in pursuit of its global ambitions. And my guest today is Cole Suttle, Cole was born, I'm saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Phew. Looks like that. Was born to high school sweethearts, and he grew up in Pasadena, California. He attended SMU and majored in religious studies with a double minor in philosophy and English, and he's currently working on a Master's of Arts in Design and Innovation at SMU. He began working for the Ritz-Carlton in Aspen and returned to Dallas to build the guest relations department from scratch for the newly opened Dallas Ritz-Carlton. He loved working for the Ritz because they have a great philosophy, and it felt like a giant laboratory for studying human behavior, focusing especially on the art of blowing people's minds. He was fascinated to better understand what the difference between a 4-star and 5-star hotel was, which led him to develop something that he likes to call the metaphysics of hospitality. He was awarded the Ritz-Carlton Gold Standard Award, which was given annually to only 5 ladies and gentlemen worldwide, so whoa on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, before switching from operations to business and executive sales to further test out his theories. The MADI program focuses on an emerging field called human-centered design, which is an approach to solving complex problems and a way of using systemic reasoning and intuition to explore ideal future states. And that makes me so happy to know that's out there.
Yes.
Concurrently, he's been working on his passion project, the Helping Friendly Book Club, which started in 2013 to search for the secrets of eternal joy and never-ending splendor. With his friends, more than anything, the book club was a way for him to keep exploring the universe, to keep searching for the truth, and to keep following his curiosity with a community of people instead of just on his own. Little did he know that almost 7 years and 32 books later, the club would still be going strong and has now grown into the Helping Friendly Foundation, a nonprofit 501c3 on a mission to help elevate the public conversation and connect people through books in convivial ways. Positioning ourselves at the confluence of the placemaking and the Little Free Library movements, the goal is to elevate the free public book exchange to the level of an art form in 3 phases. And you can see helpingfriendly.com/theplan for more. His personal quest for the truth started earlier than many, and he can trace it back to a series of events that happened when he was in high school. They seemed to be separate events at the time, but as he looks back on his life, he can see that they were all connected, each one preparing him for the next. The summer between his junior and senior year, he read a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Pirsig, which, for whatever reason, which probably I know why on that book, touched off an all-consuming intellectual awakening. He was smack dab in the middle of that disorienting awakening when he had a near-death experience in a car accident a few months later, followed shortly thereafter by the sad loss of his father to cancer, and that was all within 2 years of each other. This left a big vacuum with a lot of questions and not as many answers. So ever since then, Cole's been searching hard for deeper truths of the universe. He's been unwilling to accept many of the more cookie-cutter answers that Orthodox religion has to offer, which has led him to explore all sorts of views and perspectives to decide on his own. Those 3 events oriented Cole into reality and ignited his curiosity in a particularly powerful way that he's been striving to honor and follow and explore deeper ever since. Given that context, the formation of the Helping Friendly Book Club, it makes a lot of sense. Follow your pine cone, as you say. So welcome, Cole.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. This is an honor.
Yeah, so, before we dive in, let's just talk about, I don't know, want to do the quote and the Helping Friendly book or how you want to do it. We'll talk about that first. Yeah.
Since I feel like the book club is pretty pertinent to the family the most, I feel like giving the framework for that context creates meaning.
Yeah.
So to explain to people what exactly the Helping Friendly Book Club is, we got to do a little bit of story time. So legend has it that a long time ago in a land far away, there was this book that was written. And this book contained all the inherent knowledge in the universe. And that book was called the Helping Friendly Book, which possessed the ancient secrets to eternal joy and never-ending splendor. Right? That makes sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a long time ago, that book fell in the wrong hands. And so instead of this very powerful knowledge being used to enlighten people, it was used to control and brainwash and take advantage of people. And so this ushered in what some people call the dark age of the tyranny of the dull mind, where some say we find ourselves today. So in 2013, after hearing rumors of this legendary lost book, we decided to form a search party and call ourselves the Helping Friendly Book Club, and we have been searching for the secrets to eternal joy and never-ending splendor ever since.
Nice, I like it.
And I think that's a helpful framework when we start talking about things like secret societies in government and ancient truths coming through the modern day, and then the misuse of those truths potentially in a way by organized religion in a way that really hurts people. So I do want to, I was a religious studies major in college a lot because I went searching for the truth, and it was somewhere between philosophy and religion. And religion actually gave me a little more space to have my own opinion. And I think it's important to have, to make sense of the world on your own. Yeah. And so as we get into this, I'm fascinated by these organizations, and it's how they hide in plain sight, and people don't like to talk about them and all these things. But deep down, I'm a believer in the divine. So I'm not an atheist by any means. I just think you got to kind of find your own access to it and have faith in your own experience of reality. So I would like to start with a quote, which is actually helping from the book 32 that we're reading right now. I recommend everyone read this, which is called Skinny Legs and All. Yes, by Tom Robbins. I know the Tom Robbins fans out there are very excited. But this quote really, I found it just last night, and it seems to encapsulate everything pretty well. So, the divine was expansive, but religion was reductive. Religion attempted to reduce the divine to a knowable quantity with which mortals might efficiently deal, to pigeonhole it once and for all so that we never had to reevaluate it. With hammers of cant and spikes of dogma, we crucified and crucified again, trying to nail to our stationary altars the migratory light of the world. Thus, since religion bore false witness to the divine, religion was blasphemy, and once it entered into its unholy alliance with politics, it became the most dangerous and repressive force that the world has ever known. So that captures a lot, but we can dive into when I saw the family, and if you guys haven't binge watched this on Netflix yet, it's only 5 episodes.
Yeah. Whoa.
It is, it's the guy Doug Coe is his name, and it has been around since Ike. So President Eisenhower was the first one. So that's 50 years or so. And there are so many, every president, this guy Doug Coe is in the back of these pictures when they're meeting all these diplomats. And they intentionally made their organization to be invisible. And I think...
But under a little bit more nefarious guise, like under the thing is like, hey, we're just Jesus doing nice out here, which is good when people do like honorable things and don't need credit for them.
Sure.
Super, yeah.
Sure.
And that is more the Jesus-like, because Jesus was not the announcer of like, hey, look everybody what I did. He was a doer and let's go.
He was talking to the people. So conspiracy theory itself, I feel like is a taboo word, and so when people start thinking about anything that seems so nefarious and couldn't be true, they have this emotional reaction and clamp down. But it is true that Douglas Coe, and how to give you the most visible aspect of them is the National Prayer Breakfast, which is the third Thursday of every February, every year since Dwight D. Eisenhower. And I imagine most people out there have probably heard about the National Prayer Breakfast because every president goes and speaks.
Right. But you just think it's a thing, right?
Yeah, I never thought about who actually is hosting this.
Right.
To put it on to get everyone out of bed for breakfast. And I mean, every president, that is, Republican, Democrat.
Everyone.
Everyone.
Since then, yeah.
It's remarkable. I mean, that was wide opening. And I can just launch in, but do you have any questions in particular?
Yeah, so like with that, so we'll go with like, okay, so I guess like, before we begin, like, why do we think that people like shut down? Because I know when I bring up stuff, or even since like a child, I went to a Catholic school from 1st grade to the 11th grade, and I'm a questioner of authority. And have been since a little kid, but mostly because of observation for me personally is watching adults that would sort of preach to be one way, but then do stuff that was just like, you're like, whoa, that is like not even like doesn't match up.
Right.
And so I couldn't find the the congruence in my head. And then when I would ask questions, like for certain things like, hey, does this sound sadistic in here? Does anybody, and I would be shut down, So why is it, do you think, that religion, why is it an unquestionable thing?
Historically, I think religion has been used to control people's access to the divine. I mean, going back, I think that's understandable. And so there's definitely power and control involved, but I think it's more about human nature and the way, we're vulnerable to being manipulated. And the best way to bury something in society is to make it taboo.
Yeah.
Because when something's taboo, then that means at the mere mention of it, you're having an emotional reaction, which means you're not using your critical thinking. And
We're all up in that.
we're all
on
up in
social
that.
media.
We live in a trigger society.
I get triggered too.
Right?
And I try to be like, wait, it's just a trigger.
Right, I mean-
it's just a trigger.
And with all the social media and the inputs that, we deal with on a daily basis, we live in a trigger society. And the trigger in chief has taken it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe awareness is the best way, is to sort of notice how we react to these things. But I think, our identity, our sense of self, we create, it's like a mosaic that we build with a million different experiences our whole life growing up, from cartoon characters when we're a kid, conversation at breakfast with your parents, TV, all your experiences, traumatic and otherwise. And you assemble this identity, and then you want to protect it, and you want to believe that somewhere in the universe there's this carved out space that's safe and still.
Yeah.
And so if you learn something that starts to threaten one of the premises that you've built this whole identity on top of, I think there's a natural psychological defense mechanism to reject something that's going to disrupt
Oh, for sure.
your status quo.
Yeah.
And so this, I think, is why, religion, and a big part of religion is about not questioning authority, at least organized religion. A big part of it is, this is what your parents have done. It's don't ask.
And you're just taught that, like you get your religion from your parents usually, like it just gets passed down. You're right, unquestioned.
And so I think, I was fortunate that a lot of people don't get to the age where they can make their own decision about the divine, I think, without having, a lot of people have like a really negative reaction because maybe they were in a very religious household and
Right.
they saw through that and they had a bad example of some hypocrisy and then they reject it, and that's another way. But I was fortunate that my parents were tiny town in Alabama, but we went to church, but it was never forced on me. And then when I read Zen, the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I realized there are a lot of questions that humans have been asking since Plato, and nobody knows the answers to these. And there was religion doesn't, organized religion doesn't want to tell you that there are some questions that don't have answers, that they haven't really handled. And so I think learning to question your assumptions and your beliefs, and to sort of notice how you have these knee-jerk reactions to things, is very helpful. And the thing about the family is, so they exclusively look for rich, wealthy, young white men. And so part of it is they bring them in, and there's
That are
this
a little
house.
lost.
Yeah, they're a little lost. That are good people, but
Yeah.
and they're craving meaning in their life. I think we're all
Yeah.
craving meaning.
Exactly.
And there's not a lot of places in society that is telling you where to go find meaning, on your own. That
Right.
they're not getting some piece of the pie out of that, I feel like.
Yeah, that's true.
And so they bring these kids in, and they get
They accept you unconditionally, like it doesn't matter what, which is nice too, because everybody's done something they're not proud of in their life.
Sure.
And that, you want people to love you for who you are.
Sure.
And they offer that.
and it should be, and I think it gets a little twisted when and there's a scene in there where I don't even want to talk about it here, but where he goes and the kids are there, and he said, if you went and did something really bad and you came back,
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
remember, he's like, if you how do you think I would feel about you? Be like, oh, you judge. I'm like, no, you wouldn't judge because it's not us to judge. And so that's where they sort of use, they even,
But like without going high level, like talking about doing something really bad to kids, like what I was talking about with the clergy earlier,
Sure.
like doing things like that and just be like, oh, we don't judge. No, that's not the world we live in. Like there is, and it's not that you just leave for God to judge. Otherwise we'd have like somebody murders somebody, like, oh, leave it up to God. That's not what we do.
right. And he uses the example of the parable of the wolf and the sheep. And he's like, you probably think Christ came for the sheep, but really Christ came for the wolf, because who's going to take care of the wolf after the wolf eats all these sheep? And so it's like the idea, the wolf is the chosen one, and you all in this organization that they intentionally don't name. They call it the family, the fellowship. The wolf, the idea is that, okay, if you can get the wolf in line, then he can help you get everybody else in line. And so there's this instant forgiveness built in for the wolf. And that's why you've got all these people that are high-powered politicians, and they fall from grace, and then they are instantly repenting, but they're not really, they don't really have a choice, because the whole organization and what they represent, this power, that all these people that have invested in them to get in this position, is taken down. And so it relapsed, it's this whole behind Jesus. And so they keep saying Jesus plus nothing.
Yes.
Which is a powerful mask for just about anything. I mean, like, what exactly does that mean? Jesus plus nothing.
It means you can't, which is the things that are, what is exactly problematic about that, because it's not that people can't, don't deserve forgiveness for things that they've done wrong, but it's just not, and anybody will tell you, sorry is a word. Forgiveness is sorry plus action. It is a two-part process. It's not just punch you in the face. Oh, sorry, Cole. Sorry, Cole. Sorry, Cole.
Right.
I am not sorry. Sorry, Cole. I actually do not do it again. See if you're okay. And so the two things that are problematic for this, which hedges up why they do this, why religion is involved in here, it starts out with the no questioning, so you can't question. Right. So as soon as somebody does something bad and they front up with, and they're not, and this is the thing, because it sounds like when people really do something bad, I am so sorry, because that's real, but they're not being real. Oh, well, but you know what? I'm just like David in the Bible, and then I soldiered on and sorry, and let me throw down a Bible verse. Forget about all that stuff I did right there, because Jesus.
Right. And
and it's not real.
It's not real, and the thing about the Bible is there's a lot of ways to read the Bible. And so one of the examples I feel like we should talk is, so Mark Sanford.
Yes.
So Mark Sanford was the governor of South Carolina, I believe.
Florida, maybe? South Carolina? Something.
South Carolina has
Google
some characters. Over there. I guess Florida does too.
I don't know, one of those.
And
South Carolina.
You might remember it because he disappeared, and his staff started telling people that he was on the Appalachian Trail. I think this was 2009.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe. And so he's missing, and all the news is where is the governor of
somewhere?
And he kept saying he was on the Appalachian Trail. Well, he comes back and he holds his press conference, and he has his come to Jesus moment, kind of, and he professes that actually he was not in the Appalachian Trail, but that he had fallen in love with a woman from Argentina, and he had been down there, and he just comes all out. And he mentions in this conversation this place called C Street. He said, I've been working with the people over at C Street that have been helping him work through this spiritual crisis. So C Street is this house that is in Washington, D.C., and it's basically a fraternity for congressmen and senators to live in Christ, as they say, or they don't even say Christ. It's Jesus plus nothing. They don't even say Christ. And super involved, and so that was the first time actually there'd been a public mention of the of this fellowship. And so that was a big faux pas of Mark Sanford. But he continues to talk about, and he starts talking about David. And the story of David in the Bible is that David fell in love with Bathsheba, I think, and then Bathsheba was married, and so he fawned for Bathsheba, and so he sent Bathsheba's husband to the front lines of a war intentionally to die, and he was killed. But from this perspective, it's okay, look, this is in the Bible. It's David. You are
let's co-opt
David.
that.
Right. Let's reframe this. And
then nobody's going to question it just because they're I love that story of David. Right. That's so redeeming.
And the Bible, it's it is in the Bible. That is, you could technically read, but
from a moralistic standpoint,
right.
Anybody, hey, I like this girl, I'm going to go just try to kill their husband to get in. I don't think anybody would agree that that's a good tactic.
Right.
Morally, right, or otherwise.
And it's weird that's in the Bible,
Yeah.
But and so there are all these sort of convenient interpretations that are used to justify being chosen for, and that's a big thing. And then the big thing about that
is, just so you forget about what's going on over there, and that is why that Bible verse or Jesus is that instant, look here. Don't look at this because I'm saying Jesus and quote, Jesus quote makes you not look here because because Jesus mostly stands for it's good, and it's all like it's a good deflection.
Right. And so Doug Coe, when he created this, he said, so Doug Coe he was not the founder. He was the second. He took over for this. He was a Viking. Modern Viking is a biography of, what's his name? Alexander Verity, I think, is the one who actually founded this. So it was founded in Portland, Oregon, I think. He was a immigrant who started hosting breakfasts in Portland, and then he got the senator to come and the governor, and then it basically went from Oregon all the way up to DC, and now you have I think once Eisenhower, they got involved. And Eisenhower wasn't even really a Christian. He didn't really feel comfortable about, even participating, because there should be separation of church and state.
Right.
But he saw how effective it was, and so he came along, and now every president has followed suit. But that whole idea of separating church and state is, and one thing they talk about in the documentary is that C Street it's a church, like it's written off legally.
Tax-free status.
Tax-free status. And so another reverend started looking at this and say, how can you be a church if you're super elite, you're not inviting anybody in, there's nothing, you're not a refuge for the public, like it's a very elite.
Scamming in the USA.
Right? And so there's a lot of financial reasons, I think, to misuse religion these days.
Of course. I mean, and that's the thing, is that it just sucks that is the case, but that is the truth, that there are people scamming in every business, everywhere.
Right.
And religion to me is sometimes the worst one, because you're taking on people's blind faith that like, you're going to be good. Like we go to the same church, we believe in the same things, and they're all good. It's good stuff for the most part. You know what I mean? Like, and then scam.
And people are so especially vulnerable.
Vulnerable, yes.
When they're turning to
because you're telling about your problems, you need help,
I was as I was thinking about this, I rewatched, it's called Going Clear, which is on Scientology.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another documentary about,
whoa.
And like Dianetics, the whole thing, you do the auditing, and it's like, what is your worst memory? What is your worst fear? This is where it gets into cognitive psychology of abuse on a level, of like, oh, we're going to help you with all your
because once you become vulnerable
memories.
To me, you owe me. It's a power differential that they're pulling there. And that's what the same thing, religion uses that power hierarchy in psychology.
Right. I mean, it's like human nature. It's fascinating to see how these things happen. But because of this guise, I think that it's religion and it's taboo, and it can't be questioned. All sorts of.
It allows that to operate.
Yeah, it becomes a cover for a lot of things.
And truthfully, too, I think sometimes, like, or at least I know I felt this on, like, questioning religion. I feel like it's being disrespectful. Like, and especially as looking like, I can't ask this priest this because that's not respectful, because I'm, like, questioning the Bible. But here's what I know as an adult. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to hide. That's the truth. So,
right, I mean,
I will open back up. I'm not trying to like prove it, one way or another, but I think to just blindly trust everybody, that's not good, like in 1,000 ways, for boundaries and just for like, everybody's not good. And as much as like, I do know that the majority of the people in this world are good people and kind, and we all do little stuff here and there.
Sure.
But there's a section of people, naked. I mean, not good, bad, and in fact, evil and trying to do bad, and you can't love them enough around it.
Right.
But
and if those people with the ill intention, if they get their hands on the knowledge in the Helping Freely book, it teaches you how to manipulate people. Cognitive science, I mean, people are vulnerable, and, we don't like to think that we can be brainwashed.
Right.
You tell me I'm brainwashed, I'm going to, no way, not me. But we all are to some extent. And some people more than others.
For sure.
And like, how do you point that out to somebody without them clamping shut? And, then they're not going to listen to anything you say.
And then how do you tactfully, like, truthfully, like, say to somebody who, let's say you do meet them and they come in and they seem real nice.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And like, we go to the same church, and some people that I know, or you're new to the neighborhood.
Sure.
People do that. Where is that where you say, and I guess in my tips is watch I think we're all pretty smart for the most part. I like to watch words and I like to watch behavior. See where those line up.
Sure.
If I find incongruence, that's when you really need to trust yourself. And there's one part in the family where this comes, and I forget what this guy's name is, but then he's like in jail now. But he's like,
the senator
and even the way he says it, and he's like, well, and blah, 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 Bible verse, Bible verse, Bible verse. And the way he's even saying it is just almost like,
Right.
I'm just saying this bullshit Bible verse because I got caught, but I'm going to Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John you, and you hear this quote, end quote, Psalms, something. And you're like, are you kidding me, dude? Like,
Yeah.
you totally did that. That was wrong and that was bad, and you just threw up a Bible verse to get out of it.
Right.
Is what happened.
And so Doug Coe, the whole thing, they call it like biblical diplomacy, where basically he was going to talk, all the people that no one wanted to talk to, he would go talk. And so, for example, the guy you're talking about, I can't think of his name, and Doug Coe, they went over to talk to Gaddafi, like
Oh, yeah.
when he was person non grata, like most wanted. And he's talking about how he flew over there without a passport, didn't buy anything,
And then you're like, how are you doing that?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
at the highest
how are you
level.
doing that on a plane? Come on.
And the whole thing is they're representing the United States, but then they're saying, no, we're not. We're just talking about Jesus.
And then, but how can you do that? Like, how can you do that?
How can you do that, right? And, there's only like tax dollars who are paying for these people to go over there. But the whole thing is they go over and then, as he said, if you just mention Jesus in a conversation, it raises Jesus up and then everything else gets kind of washed away.
And they said, and we told this guy, we love you. Jesus loves you and we love you. And really, too, to a lot of people who've never heard that, that is something.
Sure.
Now, I'm skeptical. People are like, you don't know me, you don't love me. But that's just me. but for some people, but also nefarious people be like, oh, yes. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, Jesus loves me. And then wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I'm going to do something bad.
Right. And it's like instant forgiveness for all the
myriad of sins.
Yeah, the mass murders you've been doing in your country and all these things. And then next thing you know, the money flows, the oil flows, the weapon flows.
There we go.
And it's all behind Jesus. And that is where it starts getting really like, okay, what this would Christ agree with this? It's like,
well, and that really, no,
yeah,
he would not.
I mean, and to fall from grace and then not be held accountable.
I think that's where the beef is.
Yeah.
I think with this, like the whole part of it is to not be accountable.
Right.
And because you can use this religion to say, this is why you're not holding me accountable because Jesus. And
because you're going to be governor and that your influence is more valuable to this organization, than your repentance. And so that thing is like so the other example is John Ensign, who was senator or governor of Nevada, I believe, and his best friend, they discovered the family, as it's called, and Doug Coe, and John Ensign is getting ready to be. He's an up and coming politician with his eyes on presidency. And long story short, he starts an affair with his best friend's wife, so they interview his best friend is being interviewed on this, and within the context, there's a protocol for what to do when these sorts of things happen within the family. So he follows the procedures. He talks to Doug Coe, and they bring him together and they powwow, and he has him write out, I'm never going to see his wife again, and then faxes it to her right there.
I mean, which really, come on.
Literally, like they didn't let him leave the room without him writing out this, this will never happen again, one-time mistake.
Yeah.
And then he says he flew home that day, and literally like that weekend, the two of them got a hotel room, and he caught them again, and they were cheating. And so he's just losing his mind. He's like, this is not right within the family. They're going to have to handle this. But John Ensign is a very promising and up-and-coming politician. And so then they start negotiating with him. And remember, and this is before he'd even gone public, and that he was going to, they were like, just take $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
Buy a new house, forget about this. And he's like, this can't be right. So then he goes public, and then he was the only one that he got indicted, I think, for
taking money,
lobbying or something. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because he made him be a lobbyist, and so you can't do that.
Yeah, as like part of it, like as to get out. And so then, and this whole thing, but it's like they were protecting John Ensign because he was a more promising politician. And so, but you just see like and this is where I can't think of his name, but the husband of the wife that was having the affair, he's like, he does believe in Jesus. He's like, I do think Jesus is the way, but this is a total abuse of the message of Christ and using this in this really shady way. And it's it's all hypocrisy. They say one thing, but they're not living up to it.
And this guy's even come out public, but it's still operating, and that's just how big this is.
Yeah, it's definitely still operating.
I mean, just to think that, like, because we didn't want to go here too much, but the person who is currently the president, too, like, all these things that you would think, like, evangelicals would not be down with, maybe just like if you looked at his Twitter
Right.
feed and the name calling, and I have children that don't do that. I mean, or maybe they do, but they're children. But like the congruence of like, how can you, this is what I don't, how do you wrap your mind around? I mean, I know we're not all
Right.
perfect, because that's just go back then, we're all sinners, and they like to front with that. Yes, okay, but like, really, all this, and this is the
Right.
like moral high ground you put up here?
Right. That the evangelical, that our president has become the moral compass for
I mean, and that's
evangelicals.
crazy. I mean,
This is, we live in a
come now.
world where up is down. I mean, and that is at the heart of all this too. And
Okay.
we could talk about
Yeah.
that a lot.
But we'll go back to the family. I mean, because really it just is, I mean, and it's happening to like just people in general in all sorts of little cities and towns. And then,
Yeah, and I think, and it's from a strategic standpoint, the organization of these secret societies, I think that's what I'm more fascinated by. Everything. It is
Yeah.
brilliant. The whole thing is we have breakfast.
Yeah.
It's all the power for this.
it's innocuous, right?
We just have breakfast. We have breakfast and we pray together, but they get all these really powerful people to come together and
No cameras.
no cameras. Yeah, it's always
No
and so
recording.
at the national prayer breakfast, one of the guys saying, he's like, if I was a bad faith actor, this is where I want to get in because it puts you elbow to elbow with the most powerful people in the world, and it's all, we're just praying over breakfast. Mm-hmm. But all these, and like Maria Butina, who's
Yes.
the Russian, she was at the national prayer breakfast, like all these things. And so Trump does come. So it has in 2017 when he comes, because every president comes and gives a talk. And in true Trump fashion, it's this somber event. And he talks about, this is like 2017, I guess, is he starts talking about The Apprentice and how Arnold Schwarzenegger has been hired after him and how the ratings are terrible. And so he wants to
Of course, he's going to
pray
cut him down first.
for ratings for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And like, I just, I'm sure there are a lot of really good, faithful Christians in that room. And like, Trump is mocking. And
And they gloss right over it,
it's
like,
a business
whatevs.
decision. As he said, like, that was the fusion of this old and this new. And I mean, it was.
And then that to me, like, and like I said, like, I'm no picture of pillar perfect, but like, when you publicly hold yourself to this level and then you do stuff like down here, you're setting yourself up there. You know
Right.
what I mean? And saying like, oh yeah, we'll like them because it's just for politics. Well, that right and then and there is disingenuous.
Sure.
And then I don't believe any of that religious stuff coming out of your mouth because you just lied to me.
And like, how many excuses can you make before this is like, okay, you cannot, all the things he's done. And the thing is, like, the president has a long, well-documented history of being a con man and a fraud. Like, this is well-documented.
Well documented.
Trump University. he
Not fake
settled this,
university or
like,
fake news.
Not fake news, right? But, like, and so to think that, oh, now he's in power, now his character has shifted, and now,
I mean, ask any of the psychology of behavior change. Come on.
your character is pretty stable. And to get all this
Yeah.
power and now think, oh, now he's going to start telling the truth and not being kind. I mean,
Words,
nobody
actions, words,
who
actions.
actually believes that. And that's why I'm fascinated. One, there's no third, back to the Trigger Society.
Yeah.
Is that he found a way to, it's like if he's in a room and half the people in the room hate him, sometimes he does better that way. He
Yeah.
like sails into the wind and he just triggers everybody.
I mean, he is gifted in certain ways.
Gifted.
Yeah.
He is, and I think
He's got skills.
he's got skills, and one of the skills is people.
It's using the skills for bad.
Yeah, skills. It
Essentially.
is using the knowledge. It's
To dog whistle instead of like lift people up, dog whistling.
right. I mean, it is. And Scott Adams, it was the first one that pointed out that. So Scott Adams is a trained hypnotist, and he said Trump's going to win in 2015 because he's a trained hypnotist, and he could see that Trump is a trained hypnotist. I didn't even know what that meant to be a trained hypnotist. I still don't, but it opened up my eyes and started researching.
It's using linguistical tools to evoke emotion.
To trigger people without them even really realizing it. And that's what he does. He goes in there and he just, it is an amazing thing. And honestly, I imagine myself going on the moon and looking back and trying to observe everything that's going on from that perspective. Because it's very hard to not have to not be triggered one way or the other talking about the president. To have an emotionally removed,
I can't.
objective. It's and like nobody really can. And he knows this, and here we are, split, and nobody's talking about, nothing's recent fake news. It's alternative facts. Like from day one, he created this.
And it's like, and then to not bring up another Netflix documentary, did you see The Great Hack?
Yes, incredible. Oh, my God.
And then The Great Hack plus The Family.
Terrifying. And
then Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, bring it all in for a trifecta.
And we know this is true. And we live in a society where there's so much, the airwaves are just...
Well, we don't have critical thinking. And so there's just like when people are denying that, when there's like tons of climate scientists and they're like, well, I don't believe that to be true. And I'm like, Bob, the fridge guy, you may know like all that stuff, but like I'm not a climate scientist either. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I know we like to think, because I do that sometimes too. Like, well, I don't know about that. Like, I know somebody that smoked until they were 90. But smoking is bad for you and will kill you. Not everybody, but proven.
Sure.
And
we live in wild times.
Yeah.
I always feel like, oh, if he says something ridiculous and then you respond appropriately, somehow he's wanting you to do that. So it's like he's already anticipated. He's that good. And so it's like, how do you not get triggered by him? And
I don't know.
We're working on this as a society, I feel like.
That's a whole other show.
But to the point about the Great Hack. So the Great Hack is about, they call them the psychodynamics, which is basically that they can create a psychological profile of people based on their likes.
Oh, yeah, that was
Facebook
genius.
likes,
That was for reals.
that they harvested through these apps that were giving all this, literally just what you like. And so they have so much data on people now, this metadata.
We are creatures of habit.
And it talks about how the value of data just transcended the value of oil, like last year. Because
Psychological data especially.
how crazy. And so, they can, based on it, they can pick the persuadables, they call them, the people who are still potentially open to being persuaded to change their mind. And based on what they like, they create these psychological profiles, and then they do
And they changed
targeted
elections.
marketing. It is shifting election, and they start with, and the thing is, like, they were
Little
in
countries in
public about
Tripoli,
it.
or was it Trinidad?
Trinidad, right? They did like these small little islands, and then Ted Cruz was their big example. They're like, look, we just drove the needle on Ted Cruz, and then they talked, and then Brexit. They were involved in Brexit, and then
Here we are.
and then Trump, and then they don't talk about it, and then they deny that they were ever actually helping Brexit.
And then now they're in trouble.
And then now they're in trouble. And now there's a documentary with two people that were working for the company that specifically have emails working for Brexit, and they're like, no. I mean, it's this cognitive dissonance that we live in.
Where you
a
see
world
facts
where-
and you just are in, and it goes back to what you said at the beginning, this denial of we have all of our sense of self in this world. And just in psychology too, we notice that with people, sometimes when really bad things happen, like you just can't take it.
Sure.
And so when we don't choose it, like everybody gets into this sometimes where you're just like I can't know that because it's just so overwhelming mentally and emotionally that I'm not going to go there.
Sure.
And
this is, to keep going down this, MK Ultra, which is also was confidential. This is, the government was doing mind control tests on people after the Cold War. This is documented. And this whole idea of, you traumatize people so much that a certain percentage of people, as a defense mechanism, they split off from their personality and they create this alter personality because, again, it's just overwhelmed. And so now you have this alter personality, and the two personalities aren't even aware of each other. And this is the whole Manchurian Candidate and the idea of now you've got...
I mean, think of Stockholm Syndrome. I mean, all of these things, they're real.
It's so real, and it's crazy. And then think about how many pop singers have alter identities.
Yeah.
That's a whole other kind of we go down. But, I mean, and that's the thing is, like, the knowledge of how to manipulate people exists. There's a playbook for it, and
For
people
sure.
are using it. But it's almost taboo to even think that that's being done. That's what's so, it's like,
Or to even talk about it, to say and especially like I said, back to the religious stuff, which is why we're putting here, because people don't want to do that. You want to feel safe in your community, in your church, in your synagogue, in your wherever it is that you go, and you want to feel that these people are good and honest. But let me tell you, I have 3 kids, and I was abused as a small child, starting at 4. You do not just trust anybody, because it absolutely just psychological cost throughout life. So I learned this at a sober living house I was working at. It's called trust but verify.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's good boundaries. Like
Who said that? I think that was Reagan that said that.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
And
they were using it in that house too.
Right. Trump's famous best friend, or he loves Reagan.
Yeah, but it's a good one.
But he doesn't like to trust and verify.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you got nothing to hide, you got nothing to hide. So you should be okay with me saying like, for instance, like the guy who's like this electrician when I was redoing my house. I'm a Christian guy, but okay, that's cool. But you're gonna do my electricity is what I mostly wanted. And then I was getting 2 other quotes, and so I called him back. I'm like, hey, dude, you're $2,000 higher than everybody else. And you're not pulling a permit. Well, I'm Christian. You gave me my word. I go, well, you gave me your word, but you are hijacking me. That's $2,000 over,
right.
and you're not pulling a permit. So then he finally went down, still didn't pull a permit, but was trying to bully me with that. I'm a Christian. Like, don't see that I'm not pulling a permit and I'm charging you $2,000 more than this job is because we're the same.
We've got this shared experience.
Yeah. So, so how do you do that in saying like, and I didn't call him out on that, like, no, you're not a Christian, dude, you're a scammer,
Yeah.
And can you be both, I guess?
And it's scary out there in this world. And so this is why one of the first insights we discovered on the quest for suchness is we like to say, follow your pine cone. Your pine cone is your pineal gland, another word for pineal gland.
I was wondering that. Okay.
Yes. So the pine cone is the seat of your intuition, they say. And it used to be a lot more active. And have you ever been to the Vatican?
I have been to the Vatican, yeah.
Okay, I've not actually been to the Vatican, but there's a place, the Court of the Pine, which is one of the big courtyards there, and there's an enormous bronze pine cone. Do you remember seeing this?
No, I was in college.
I know, if you're not looking for it, you don't really Google this, Court of the Pine. That's from like 2 BC, and no one really has an answer of why is there a giant pine cone statue in the middle of the Vatican. And again, Christianity, there's a reason that all our holidays, Christian holidays, line up with the pagan holidays that came before them. It's the truth comes from nature. It starts way, way back. And, Christianity came and reclothed it and disrupted the pattern thoughts of the ancient world, but we're still very much, everything is in harmony with the seasons, and religion is all built on that. So the pine cone, as we say, follow your pine cone to see your intuition, but it's kind of scary to tell everybody to follow what you think is best, and that's, I think, where religion comes, is this, we can't have everybody thinking for themselves, or how are we going to, society could go in any direction. But I think we need to gain more confidence in our own access to the divine and trust our own intuition a lot more. And so
and know that you can question.
Right. Is start reading the book. Just look for it. And it's not going to be the same book for everybody, but the only way you're going to discover something is if you're looking for it. And people are not really looking for it right now because I won't say everybody, but if you get in a habitual way of thinking, like in an organized religion, maybe you stop questioning, and maybe there's room to start questioning a lot more.
Ooh, and that's almost a good way to end it. So 1 more minute, just real quickly. You want to say anything else about the Helping Friendly Book Club?
Yeah, no, I would say, the best way to fight fake news is to read books and develop your critical thinking. So if you go to helpingfriendly.com, we are looking to elevate the public conversation and connect people through books, and we're going to reframe the way people think about them through free public book exchanges. And we're pretty much out of time, but check out helpingfriendly.com and sign up for our newsletter and come to our next book club.
Awesome. And I will put that all in the show notes so you can find out more about Helping Friendly Book Club and to get a hold of Cole. And remember to, I like to say, question authority. Question, 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 because you know that there is always another way.